everybody. This is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode 169 of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. So today, I'm really pumped about today's episode. Actually, the next 2 weeks episode. So the episode that'll drop next Thursday too. We're going to focus on mindset. As you guys could see, had a great, clever title for today's name, today's title. Clever name for today's title. I think that would have been a better way to say that. But regardless, get your head in the game and not in a guillotine. I'm proud of that one. That's a good one, right? It's weird how much that naming the episode something silly matters to the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show listeners. I literally can double an episode's listens if I just have a more clever title, a little funnier of a title. And so hopefully you guys are interested in getting your head in the game and not in the guillotine. Also, on that same note, like I said, we're going to talk about mindset for the next 2 weeks. This week, we're going to focus on what I would kind of call a learner's mindset. This is a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Next week, we're going to talk more and really lean more into some ideas on mental toughness, what I consider mental toughness, how I think you can develop it, and just a lot of stories of people that I've seen that have been mentally tough and have accomplished great things through that mental toughness. And so, like I said, but that's next week. This week, we're really going to look at just the difference between a growth mindset and maybe a performance-based mindset. And we're going to probably talk about some things mentally that you struggle with, that I struggle with. A lot of times we don't even realize that we are struggling with. I have a lot of really good mindset stuff coming. One of the big benefits of being the host of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show is I've gotten to have so many conversations with so many just really, really mentally strong people that have learned certain habits and learned certain things to allow them to go way further than they would if they had the wrong mindset. And so that's what we're going to look at today. As always, don't forget, if you guys enjoy this podcast, if you're getting something out of it, the best way to show me that, to let me know that, is to give me a 5-star review on whatever platform that you listen. If you watch on YouTube, the normal things apply. A like and a subscribe would be great. But that's not all that I have for you. I thought I would make sure to give this recommendation because I really love how it turned out. But just a few days ago, an episode of the Elbows Tight podcast just came out where they interviewed me, where John and Travis talked to me about jiu-jitsu, designated winner, kids jiu-jitsu, growing up in the jiu-jitsu space. It's just so many cool topics that we get to talk about. And I wanted to make sure to share that with you guys and let you guys know about that episode, simply because I really like how it turned out. I really liked all the talking points that I got to hit, and yeah, just really enjoyed it. If you guys want to hear me get interviewed and kind of be on the other side, be sure to check out that episode. I think you guys will really enjoy it. And I think that is all that we have to talk about before we go ahead and get into today's episode. Let's go ahead and jump into the episode. All right, guys. So I thought a good place to start with this episode is just kind of going to be defining what we're going to be talking about. I'll probably use different words for these, but we're going to be talking about a fixed and a growth mindset. Most of what we contrast today is going to be kind of this, it's kind of a spectrum, right? I don't think you absolutely have one or the other. I don't think it's this thing where like, oh, this guy's a growth mindset guy and this guy's a fixed mindset guy. I really think in every aspect of our lives, we kind of get a choice on which one of these two that we can lean towards, right? And with anything positive, it's like a muscle, right? Anything that we're trying to develop, like, so if we're trying to develop our growth mindset, it's not a switch. It's not something that you have or you don't. It's something that you're going to get better at, and it's a practice, I guess would be the best way to say that. But like we said, we'll kind of just define the two and then we'll start to dig in. So the first thought, what is a fixed mindset? What is this thing that we do not want to have? Probably in any area of life, but especially in jiu-jitsu. It's going to destroy your learning. You are not going to get better near as fast if you have a fixed mindset. Even if you are one of the most talented individuals, even if you have more athletic ability, if you're smarter than everybody else on the mat, if you approach jiu-jitsu with a fixed mindset, you will hit a ceiling. There will be a certain point where you stop being able to overcome, where you stop being able to grow. What this mindset looks like is this is going to be somebody who thinks that their ability, that their intelligence, that their talents are all fixed traits. They are simply God-given traits. You cannot grow them. You either have the talent to do this or you do not. And a lot of times you see this mindset in like natural athletes. You see this mindset in people that aren't athletes too, right? That get discouraged pretty easily too. They don't see that they can overcome. They don't see that they can grow. But where I see this mindset the most, at least where it's noticeable the most to me, is people who things kind of come naturally to. Because what happens is you start to learn jiu-jitsu in the beginning, and maybe things are natural. And maybe you get people start telling you, man, you're going to get your blue belt in 6 months. You're going to get your blue belt in a year. You're so amazing. You're so good. And you go, okay, well, these are my talents. I will just have these forever. And you believe that fixed mindset that there is no growth in your natural ability. There's no growth in your intelligence. There are no growth in really what we talk about all the time on the show is the importance of developing skills, the importance of breaking down everything that you can into a developable skill, right? And the fixed mindset is the opposite of that. The fixed mindset says, this is what I have. I will always be this intelligent. I will always be able to understand jiu-jitsu at the level that I understand it now. Usually people will get to their blue belt and they'll be adding moves and adding moves and adding moves. And I remember even thinking this to myself. There was this point where I kind of knew moves. I knew techniques from every position. And I remember thinking as a blue belt, and keep in mind, I was 17 when I was a blue belt. So I was an idiot, or even 16 when I was a blue belt. So I was stupid. So give me that. But I remember thinking, what else is there? What else is there for me to even add? I know attacks from every single position. I know what move I should always be going for. I can beat all these blue belts. But then when I go with a brown belt or a black belt, and that was pretty uncommon. That was pretty unheard of. But when I got to go with them, they would crush me. It wasn't even close. And so now I'm having to play in my head. So what could I even be adding? What could I even be focused on? And that right then for me, it really was a fixed mindset. It came because I only knew one avenue, one lens, if you will, to learn jiu-jitsu through. I only knew how to, what we would call in the three lenses ebook, which I'll let you guys know about how you could get that for free later on in the episode. I would call that the athletic lens. That's the way that most people start to learn jiu-jitsu, and most people continue to learn jiu-jitsu forever. And I think if you only focus on that, your ability, your chance of developing a fixed mindset they're really high. You really have a big chance of falling into that mindset of getting your purple belt and saying, well, there's just nothing more for me to know. And that is because you've only seen jiu-jitsu from one perspective. We'll get into that in a little bit, but let's look at the other side of the coin. Let's look at what a growth mindset is. Like we said, a fixed mindset believes that everything is a fixed trait. A growth mindset is the belief that your ability, that your intelligence, that your talent It can be developed. It can be improved through hard work, perseverance, and most importantly, learning from your mistakes. The ability to ask questions, right? The ability to find questions to ask, get inspired, and ask questions. That is what a growth mindset is. Let me contrast I gave you guys the example of when I was a blue belt, and I was like, there is nothing more for me to learn. And let's fast forward 13 years later. Now I'm a black belt. I teach seminars all over the country. I compete at the highest level that you can compete at. I run a gym, do all these things in the jiu-jitsu space that people out from the outside would look. Oh, obviously, yeah, I have a podcast too where I talk about jiu-jitsu learning every single week. I get to be on other podcasts and talk about those things. Little side note, really excited about this. Just got asked to do. I told you guys last week how cool it was to get mentioned 2 weeks in a row on the BJJ Mental Models podcast. Steve Kwan actually asked me to be on the show, on the BJJ Mental Model show really soon. So we're actually going to record the day that this episode comes out. I don't know when that episode will actually come out, but we will be recording then, and that's really exciting. But for me, of all these things that people would say, wow, this is Josh. Josh is great at all these things. He's amazing at all these things. I can tell you 100%, without a doubt, my understanding of every single one of those things, podcasting, competing, running a school, teaching, over the last 12 months, over the last 18 months even, has been turned on its head. Totally turned on its head. It has, and I don't want to say like, oh, I've gotten so much better. I don't think that. I honestly think I've started to realize the places that I lack. I realize the places that I could get better. I'm not even there yet. I'm not even at that point where I'm saying, oh yeah, now I am this amazing competitor and this amazing podcaster, this amazing, all these other things. Really changing how I looked at myself and how I looked at learning and realizing I have so much more to learn has increased my jiu-jitsu, has increased every part of my jiu-jitsu so much, like so much. And I've said this before. I said this 10 years into jiu-jitsu. Like on my 10th year, I was like, I think I got better on my 10th year than I did the first 9 years of training. And I think that over the last 2 years, I think I've probably gotten better over the last 2 years in all those aspects than the first 13 years of training. And maybe I'm just insane, right? Maybe I'm just crazy. And I just believe that I'm getting better. But I guess kind of my argument, the reason I do think that I am getting better at all these things is because I'm noticing growth. I'm noticing growth in all these things. And for me, 1% better at this point versus 1% better when I was a white belt, it's not even close, right? That 1% at black belt has so much more value, right? I'm so much further because, as we talk about all the time, you're learning your habits that you develop through jiu-jitsu. It continues to compound, meaning 1% at white belt is way less than 1% better at blue belt, right? Because you are better as a blue belt. It's the same at purple belt. It's the same at brown belt. So every time that you are doing jiu-jitsu, every time that you get your next promotion, I promoted 3 new head nod HQ or head nod black belts on Monday night. It's this awesome experience. I promoted 6 new head nod brown belts. Again, awesome experience. All of those people that got promoted, they should, even the people that got their purple belts, the people that got their blue belts, they should plateau. They should run into an area, right? Because they're focused. All those people that I promoted are focused on progression. They're focused on getting better. Hopefully, They're looking through this lens, whatever lens that is, whether they're drilling their techniques in the athletic lens, they're learning how to feel with the artistic lens, they're learning how to kind of ask the right questions with the scientific lens, whichever one of those. What should happen is they should start to get really good at that and then run into a spot where their development starts to stop. Their development starts to get slower. And when that happens, because this is just natural, this is just a part of training jujitsu, you should run into these plateaus. What they will do, hopefully, because they've been in this environment long enough, is they'll ask questions. Maybe to me, maybe to some of the other black belts or other brown belts or other purple belts. Maybe they'll watch instructions. Maybe they'll watch YouTube videos, anything to develop more perspective. Because then they can take that perspective and they can start applying it to their training. They can be consistent, develop habits to take that perspective and weaponize it, if you will. They will start developing whatever skill they got inspired by, whatever idea they got inspired by. It can be something as simple as, we talk about this on the show, taking steps from the guard. That's something you'll notice high-level guys do really well, is they walk around the guard. They don't just walk with their feet and then stop moving, and then it just become hand fighting. They create angles, they create distance, they absorb distance by moving their feet. Maybe one of those guys that got promoted, maybe they don't do that, and they start to notice, hey, Josh talks about creating angles, and I don't do that a lot. I kind of just get into the guard and I look to win the grip fight so I can try to knee cut. There's nothing wrong with that. But eventually, if you're not kind of getting enough perspective, if you're not developing your game well enough, the knee cut itself won't work. Eventually, people will start to stop that knee cut. So what you do is you ask yourself enough, why am I taking steps from the guard? Is there a skill that is not developed? Because taking steps from the guard, creating those angles, doing those things, that is a skill. That is not something that somebody just automatically knows, right? It's not a technique even. It's not something that I can say, you should always put your feet these places in this order and in this rhythm. It doesn't work like that. You have to break it down as a skill. And what happens, the reason that that happens is because you deal with obstacles. You deal with obstacles. For us, a lot of times in jiu-jitsu, we call our obstacles plateaus. Sometimes the obstacle is discouragement. Sometimes the obstacle is another training partner. Maybe it's somebody that you just absolutely cannot beat. Maybe it's somebody that you don't like and you absolutely cannot beat. That can be frustrating, right? Maybe it's an injury, but you're dealing with some type of obstacle that you have to overcome. That is when you get the choice to have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. Every time we deal with something like that, this is the same for life. If you run a business, you'll find that there are a lot of jiu-jitsu habits that really apply well to business. I don't have any kids. I'm married, but I assume if you run a family, you'll find that same thing. There are a lot of jiu-jitsu habits that really do matter for having a strong family, for being, if you are the leader of your household, for being a strong leader of your household. And one of the main habits is how you respond to obstacles, how you respond to adversity. We talked about this. Man, I just had this thought. I guess we really focused 3 weeks in a row on mindset. Because last week we talked about mindset too, and next week we're going to talk about mental toughness. I forgot that we talked about mindset last week. That's why it's still fresh on my mind. That's why I'm doing this episode, I guess. But we talked about the importance when you're going to compete and you're looking at what mindset to have. We talked about this saying that one of the most important things is how well you respond to adversity, whether or not you're going to win in a tournament. The person that you're going to deal with adversity, whether it's sickness, whether it's injury, whether it's exhaustion, whether it's simply a tough opponent where you're fighting in tough situations. But how well you respond to adversity generally is going to determine how you do in the tournament, right? When we take a step back, how well you respond to adversity on the mats in general, just in your daily, your weekly, your monthly training, that is going to determine the grappler you are years from now. How well you respond to adversity in your business. Nothing that you will do in life that is worth doing will you have no adversity. I mean, maybe I'm wrong by this. I've only been around for 29 years. So I could be wrong. Maybe there's something out there that's worth doing that doesn't require adversity, but I haven't found it yet. If you guys find something like that, let me know, especially if it makes money, let me know about that. But when you look at your business, when I look at my jiu-jitsu business, the growth of my business is always different. There have been times that I have had Facebook advertising that has just been through the roof. And it's like, I almost don't have time to deal with how many new students that we get. And then there have been times months later that with the exact same Facebook advertising, it didn't work at all. I was losing money on it. Well, that sucks. How do I respond? So often the fixed mindset would tell you, no, this used to work. Just keep doing it. Or even it's unfair. It's because these other businesses that have more money than me are advertising and it's killing my advertising, or Facebook has gotten too expensive. Okay. Those things can happen. Those things could be true, but they are still adversity that you have to respond to. You can choose not to respond to them. You can choose to accept them as just, this is how life is, or you could respond. So let's bring this back to specifically on the mat. I'll talk about this one. I don't know if I've ever truly talked about this on the show, and I've alluded to it a million times, but I'm really anti, especially in the moment, I'm really anti talking about injuries, especially when I'm competing, because one, if a competitor were to just listen to an episode, they could be like, okay, Josh has this injury, right? But two, if you lose at a tournament and you talk about, especially if you have a public platform like I get to, and you talk about, oh, well, I was sick, or I was injured, or I was out of shape, or I was whatever, right? Those things really don't matter. If anything, the only reason people talk about them is because it makes them feel better when it comes to losing. But if you think that way, if you let yourself have that excuse, to me, that is the prime example of a fixed mindset. Saying, well, the only reason I lost that match is because I was injured. No, there are all kinds of other reasons that you've lost that match. There have been people with the same injury that you have that have won matches of that magnitude, with the same sickness, with the same level of exhaustion. So you've got to accept those things. You got to accept that those things are on you. But now I'll make excuses for all my losses and talk about some injuries. No, I won't. Like I said, the injury that I faced did not have to do with my performance. Okay. I just really want to talk about how I dealt with the injury, what I did wrong, and then what I eventually did right. Okay. So a while back, a few years ago, I got a rib injury, and I had rib injuries before, and everybody in the jiu-jitsu space has had rib injuries before, but I've never dealt with it on the magnitude that I dealt with it. When I first injured my rib, I went 17 days consecutively. I wasn't able to teach. I was not able to do anything. I went 17 days where I couldn't flush my toilet. Not I couldn't use the bathroom. The pressure of putting my hand on the handle and pushing down, my rib would just pop and come right back out. It was horrible. It was the worst injury that I have ever experienced in jiu-jitsu. And what sucked was I actually dealt with that injury for 18 months. Um, I competed through it. I trained through it. I tried to be safe with my training. I tried to learn from it, but it sucked. It was really frustrating. I don't think that in a lot of the competitions it directly mattered. You know, it wasn't like I was in the match and my rib would hurt. A few times that happened. Um, but the big difference was that be I wasn't able to match people physically in the way that I used to. And of course, you go with guys. If you're a natural jujitsu athlete, that is going to be part of competing in jujitsu. There are going to be people that you run into. It doesn't matter how good you are about your rest, how good you are about your lifts, how good you are about all those things. There are going to be people that if they are on and you are not, that you simply can't physically deal with. And what that rib injury did for me, as bad as it was, as frustrating as it was at the time, is it created this situation where I was having to approach matches strategically more than ever before. Because I knew, okay, I've got about 4 minutes of actual jujitsu in me. I've got 4 minutes of offense in a 10-minute match. How am I going to be able to do this? How am I going to be able to win this? And most of the matches I just lost. But what would happen after every match is I was getting to basically compete at 70% of my normal physicality, 70% of my normal cardio, 70% of my normal strength, my normal athleticism. And it was making me have to develop new jujitsu strategies and new jujitsu mindsets in order to do well in competition. I was able to almost separate some of the competitions and say, okay, this competition, obviously I want to win. I'm here to win, but I'm fighting somebody who's so good that I need to be at 100% to be able to have a chance against. And I'm nowhere near 100%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on, can breath work actually help with the anxiety of competing? Because if I can check that box when I am physically healthy again, when I can actually get after it again, I'm going to have the mindset. I'm going to have the warm up down. I'm going to have the routine down. And so just like we talk about when we talk about designated winner, you pretend things are a video game, you pull out little bits of them, you develop the little skills, and you benefit so much from that. And I fast forward to now, right? And of course, I learned a million more lessons, but I fast forward to now where I'm getting to compete again as an athlete. I'm getting to compete again as somebody who's in shape, who's in the right weight class, who's got cardio again, who's got strength again, who's got flexibility again. And I developed those things because I realized where my rib injury was coming from. And the big holes that I've been dealing with, that I've been having, they were actually produced by me, right? These injuries that I keep dealing with, they were produced by me because I didn't have the right routine. I didn't have the right habits. And those habits were fixed because of the adversity that I faced. And don't get me wrong, there were times coming home from tournaments where I really wanted to win, where I was fighting really high level guys and I got smashed. That I would get home and I would cry in the shower after the tournament. Don't be confused by that. Don't think that a growth mindset always looks ultra positive and always looks ultra tough. But then I would wash my face with the water and pretend that was just water and not tears. I would dry off and I would get back to the gym. I would get back to training. I would get back to what I could do better. And so when we are looking at developing a growth mindset, developing the right mindset, that is pretty much, we're going to get choices, right? Every single time we face adversity, every single time we're smashed in bottom half guard, you get a choice. Am I going to grow from here? Am I going to learn how to not get put here anymore? Am I going to learn how to escape? Or am I going to wilt? Am I going to say, well, once I get put in bottom half guard, I always lose. And I just, because we're not believing that everything is a developable skill. Is that how I'm going to face adversity? Is the guy that beats me down every single week and talks trash, the teenager at the gym that just thrashes me and, tells me that I'm not a man? Am I going to try to get him eventually? It doesn't have to be an angry thing when that happens. Keep in mind, that teenager is a big part of your jiu-jitsu journey. Him beating you down every day, him discouraging you every day, that is a huge part of whether or not you are going to develop a growth mindset or you're going to stay fixed. You're going to stay right where you're at. So let's go ahead and because I need to shift a little bit what I'm talking about. And I feel like I could stay on this topic forever and just give examples and tell stories. So let's go ahead and move to a commercial. Our host, Josh McKinney, has a cool new ebook that you guys have probably never heard of that he is going to tell you about and try to get you guys excited about. Let's get to the commercial. What is up, guys? This is Josh McKinney, and I am excited to share my brand new, absolutely free ebook with you, The 3 Lenses. So The 3 Lenses is all about learning jiu-jitsu, really with a growth mindset. Remember, it's available for free at simplifyingjujitsu.com/3. And in this ebook, I'll walk you through the 3 key lenses that can help you develop a growth mindset in your jiu-jitsu training and take your skills to the next level. I'll cover topics like embracing challenges, learning from mistakes, and just dealing with the everyday stuff that you deal with in the jiu-jitsu space. And not just focusing on outcomes, really focusing on how to actually get better at jiu-jitsu. Whether you're a beginner just starting out, or you are a practitioner that's been around the jiu-jitsu space for years, there is something in the 3 lenses that can help you overcome, that can help you get better, that can help you grow. So head over to simplifyingjujitsu.com/3 and download your free copy of the 3 lenses today. I cannot wait to hear what you have to think. All right, we're back from the commercial break, and we are now going to look at, how many of these are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're going to look at 6 tips on developing a growth mindset. And these are just really simple tips. We're going to apply them all to jiu-jitsu, and hopefully we're going to get through them relatively quickly. It's hard for me to go on any point and not take like 10 minutes on it. So I'm going to try to go with this. So first place we're going to start for developing a growth mindset is going to be embracing challenges. It is really, really easy when we face a challenge, when we face adversity, to go into the woe is me mindset. I can't believe that I have to deal with this. I can't believe that this person did this to me, right? I can't believe that this person, that I lost this person out of my, this person's out of my life now, right? Whatever happens in your life, it's a challenge, right? Anything bad is this challenge. And you have to embrace these challenges. That doesn't mean, all right, so I never quote the Bible at you guys, but there's a verse in Thessalonians, I think, First Thessalonians, and it is about, it says to be thankful in all circumstances, to be thankful. And the wording is very smart. It makes a lot of sense to me. It does not say for all circumstances, be thankful. It says in all circumstances, be thankful. Okay. So how I can kind of look at this from a jiu-jitsu perspective, there have been times for me that I've been the guy at the gym. Training under my coach, I was one of his, I was thinking it was like his second purple belt. My dad was his first purple belt. Maybe I was his third purple belt. I could be wrong. I could have been his third. I don't know. But still one of his highest ranking guys, definitely his youngest, most athletic, high ranking guy. And, I was going really long periods of time where nobody was scoring on me. Nobody was beating me in grip fights. Nobody was challenging me. And of course, when you're young and when you're coming up, you dream of that. And you're like, yeah, this is what I want. I want to just be the best here. But there's a problem with that. If you are not getting challenged, and this, like I said, for purple belt, this was a lot of what purple belt was for me. The only time that I was getting scored on, that I was getting submitted, that I was losing was when I would go compete and I was having to fight this high level of guy. And at that time, I really wasn't embracing those challenges. I was really struggling to do that. It was discouraging. It was embarrassing, especially when the whole team looked to me to kind of carry the flag as a competitor. They were like, hey, you never lose to us and you lost to this guy. What's up with that, Josh? And it was really frustrating. And then I contrast that towards the end of my purple belt. I told you guys this before, but this is that time is when I started to create these lies to convince high-level guys to come and train at our gym. We would lie to a bunch of different black belts around the area and say that, like, oh yeah, this guy's coming on Thursday. So if you want to train with him, you should come on Thursday too. And then I would tell that guy, I would be like, hey, this other guy's coming on Thursday. And it just would work out. These guys would show up and we would get all kinds of high-level training. And what would start to happen is I would start to get beat up. And don't get me wrong, I was never getting my guard passed 5 or 6 times in the round easily by Ezra Lennon, laying on bottom and thinking, this is great. I love this. No, I was trying so hard. I was like so frustrated. I couldn't even get this guy to work. But when I contrasted it back to, remember when I didn't have people that could pass my guard? Remember when I didn't have people that could show me the holes in my game? So instead of, when you face these challenges, instead of saying, all right, Josh says I have to be thankful for these challenges. No, it's not like that. But so often that challenge is a product of the situation that you wanted to be in anyway. You don't want to get smashed in side control anymore? Just quit jiu-jitsu. It'll never happen again. Or you can embrace it. You can say, this guy is smashing me in side control, and one day I'm going to figure out a way not to. One day I am going to beat this. If I wasn't getting this, I wouldn't know that this was a hole in my jiu-jitsu, that this was a hole in the grappler that I'm trying to become. The only way you're going to fill that hole is through challenges, through embracing those challenges. And maybe embrace is the wrong word. Maybe sometimes we just have to endure those challenges. But regardless, when you face those challenges, keeping a thankful mindset, being happy that you can even be on the mat. I really learned this from my dad, who's in his 60s now, and still trains with me, still trains with the guys at the gym. I got to get done with the podcast within the next 28 minutes because he and I are going to train before class tonight. And I got this mindset of, it could be a lot worse. I could be like all the other 60-year-old people that I deal with, right? That don't get to do jiu-jitsu, that don't get to do anything. Their lives are a lot of them, their lives are pretty much like, okay, let's wait to die from here on out. Or he could go into the gym and get smashed by a younger, more athletic purple belt. He's not going to get discouraged by that. He's going to say, man, I'm so glad that I get to be beat up by this purple belt. I'm happy about this, right? Let's look at the next tip. Next tip for a growth mindset is to focus on effort over result. It's so easy to get in the performance-based mindset in the jiu-jitsu space. So easy to drive home each night and to look at, hey, today was good or today was bad. Today was good because I submitted that guy that I always have tough rounds with. Today was bad because he submitted me twice. This is not the thought process to have. I really loved how John Will, I think it's like episode 102, maybe somewhere in that area. I'll make sure to link it in the description of this. But John Will is Australia's first jiu-jitsu black belt, and it really has some great perspectives on jiu-jitsu. He's just been around the space for so long, taught so many different people. But he said that he does not try to view his days as good or bad days. He says, I just have days. But if I'm in a place that I don't want to be in, right? He's like, if you're in bottom side control, you don't just think, get out. He goes, you're probably not good enough to get out. You probably got put there for a reason. Instead, focus on getting out 5%. Get in 5% better of a situation. He gave the other example of if you're in $100,000 in debt, you can't just make $100,000. Because if you could, you probably wouldn't be $100,000 in debt. You can't just flip that switch, but you can make $5,000. You can pay off $5,000 of that debt or $500 of that debt. But you focus on the effort. You don't focus on the result. Talk about the importance so much. We've been talking about the importance of systems over results, of systems over goals even. You have this goal of a black belt. You don't just get your black belt. You slowly become a black belt. You develop certain habits, certain routines, a certain schedule that eventually, with enough effort, you get to black belt. And enough tweaking and enough, changes, you will get to black belt. So that is focusing on effort over performance. So when you're decompressing from class, even if you are being a little hard on yourself, because sometimes you do need to look at your mistakes and say, hey, I did this wrong. I need to get better at this. Sometimes you do need to have those little conversations with yourself. All right, Josh, you're being a baby. Toughen up. Quit crying in the shower. It's time to grow. It's time to get better. You don't want that to happen again. You know how to make it not happen again. Sometimes you have to do that. You have to have those hard conversations with yourself. But I think before you have that conversation, a little blurb in your head, you can say, am I giving as much effort as I can? Am I working as hard as I can? Because sometimes that's all you can do. Sometimes you're giving everything you have. You're believing in yourself. You're learning in as many different places as you can learn. And you're still not getting to the result that you want. Focus on effort. Say, hey, I am putting in the effort. Eventually, this effort is going to compound, and eventually, I'm going to get to where I need to go. The next thought is to learn from mistakes. This is something most of us make so many mistakes on the mats. Most of us make so many mistakes off the mats. But since we are the hero of our own story, sometimes it's hard to not look at that adversity as things that we are actually making mistakes on. I'll go back to my rib injury. I thought this was just something I was dealing with, and I was getting really frustrated. Nobody I talked to, no video I watched gave me any information on healing this rib injury, on getting it better. And I dealt with it, like I said, for 18 months. And then I started to make some small changes to my routine. I started to make certain habits. I think I've talked about this, but I started to stretch every day. This doesn't mean I do a yoga session every day. Doesn't mean I'm doing an hour of stretching every day. I just started to make sure that I was focused on my effort and I was saying, hey, my effort is good, but it's not consistent. My effort for this, like jiu-jitsu's physical. And I need to be focused on my physical body and not just training method, not just what I'm doing on the mats. I had to learn that I was making big mistakes off the mats that I probably developed from being 14 when I started jiu-jitsu and not needing to do anything off the mats, not needing to stretch every day, not needing to make sure I'm hitting my lifts every single week. But then I got around certain guys that were older than me and healthier than me. Got around, you guys heard the episodes I've done with Mark Vives. You get around Mark, and I told this story before. I taught a seminar with him, or it was a camp. Shout out to the Stronghold BJJ camp. They actually just started accepting registration, I think yesterday, for the Stronghold Jiu-Jitsu camp. That this year is going to be myself, Mark Vives, Nick Sanders. Obviously, you guys know me. Both guys have been on the podcast before and are just excellent human beings and unbelievable jiu-jitsu coaches. Actually, both unbelievable jiu-jitsu competitors too. But both guys, I have learned so much of my mistakes on routine, on health from. Last time I was at that camp, it was Chewy was teaching with us. Me, Chewy, and Mark were talking. This was like after we had all trained the day before. We all taught seminars the next day and then all trained right after that. So this is after all that. We're going to watch the UFC and we're all at the gym. And Mark was like, hey, we're just talking about whatever. Mark's like, hey, why aren't we rolling out right now? I was like, what? What do you mean? And all of a sudden, Mark's pulling, like foam rollers out of his bag. And we've got all these different things and we're just rolling out while we're having this conversation. And it clicked for me. These dudes really focus, and Chewy was the same way. These guys focus on their physical health, on their flexibility, on their injuries so much more than I do. Maybe that's why I'm dealing with this rib injury still. And it made such a difference, right? Because there was a mistake that I'd been making for years, just a habit that I hadn't developed yet. And it made such a difference. And then that brings me to the next tip. And this kind of falls under that same umbrella, and that is seeking feedback. Seek feedback. That is so important. I think from the start of learning a new technique, you should be seeking feedback. I talk about this on the show, like how jiu-jitsu conversations matter so much. When I'm trying to learn the knee cut and I'm starting to put my opponent in the position or my training partner in the position, we're just drilling it a little bit because eventually we're going to ramp up the speed and get to designated winner on that knee cut, of course. But we're just drilling it. Maybe I say, hey, how is this feeling? Is my weight good in this place? And maybe my partner says, no, I feel like I can just turn on my side and defend. And so maybe we have this conversation back and forth. Well, where does my body position need to be? You should be chin over trap. Josh always talks about that. You should absolutely do that. And so you're able to start to get your knee cut better with that conversation, with that little bit of feedback. Sometimes the feedback is you talking to your coach. I don't think going in and saying, coach, what could I be doing better is ever really a great question. The reason I don't think that is because your coach has 100 students. For you to ask that generic question, hey, what could I be doing better? It seems to me like a cop-out. Sometimes you do need to ask that. You need to ask the blanket statement, maybe because you just don't know where to go. But it's so much like my conversation, my students that ask me these questions, the conversation is always better if the student starts with, I've been trying to become a better competitor. I've been trying to get better at half guard passing. I've been trying to do this. What could I do better? If the student comes with the focus, and then ask me for feedback, I'm going to be able to give so much more than if they come without focus. If they just come in and say, well, I'm just, yeah, I just don't know what I should even be doing right now. What should I do? Well, you should get inspired. If you don't have inspiration, there's nothing I can do with this. I can't give you feedback. You don't have a focus. I just can't give you feedback. And if I do, it's just going to be generic. It's just going to be the same thing I would tell any purple belt or any blue belt, right? So when you're seeking feedback, it should be based on your focus. It should be based on your goals. Of course, sometimes you do just need generic feedback. Ask somebody, your coach may have less valuable feedback than your main training partner. Your main training partner could have better feedback, could literally just be like, oh, well, I've been beating you with this a lot. I don't even know how you could overcome that, but this is the obstacle that you're facing. Just a little more definition of that. And then you can embrace the challenge. You can focus on your effort and learn from your mistakes, right? And now we'll look at the next tip. We have 2 more tips left, and I actually had a little bit of more stuff to talk about, but I've just been talking too much. We'll kind of get that in with next week's episode where we talk about mental toughness, because really I just was going to talk about maintaining the growth mindset through all of your jiu-jitsu journey. But to me, that maintaining of any mindset is mental toughness. Spoiler alert, that's what next week's episode is going to be about. So the 2 last tips that I will leave you guys with. First is to emphasize the learning process. So jiu-jitsu is really, really hard to learn. It is really, really, really hard to master. It's part of what makes it beautiful. It's part of what makes it awesome, is the fact that it is this long journey of learning and improving, rather than just like trying to reach a specific goal, right? You always come in with specific goals, or at least a lot of people do. I want to lose weight. I want to get in shape. I want to do whatever. I had a guy come in one day, first class, and told me that his goal was to get to fight Gordon Ryan. First class, never showed up again. First class, right? And so often, that is how people think that goals work. So often, that is how people think that getting to black belt works. Yeah, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to tell him, like, yeah, I'm here to fight Gordon Ryan. Like, dude, I've been training for 15 years. That's not even my goal. You should chill. You should focus on making sure you come back tomorrow. That is the pitfall of people that think setting a goal is what matters. The process is what matters. The process is what gets you to the goal. And so often it's just easy. We have these big dreams. We have these big places we want to be. We forget that the process is what matters, that the journey is what matters. People get their black belts. Like I said, I got to promote 3 new black belts this week. And it's just a really awesome experience. And something that people will always tell black belts is, now the journey begins. And really, there is some truth to that to me. It's crazy how much of your jiu-jitsu starts. For years, all you're trying to do is get to black belt. And once you're there, then you got to say, well, what am I going to do with all this jiu-jitsu knowledge? Am I going to teach? Am I going to compete at black belt? What am I going to do with this? And a lot of times for most of us, the journey begins there. And even though the goal was black belt, the journey begins there. I was watching the show Meat Eater. It's with Steven Ranella. If you guys have never watched that show, I mean, maybe if you're like a vegan, you probably shouldn't watch the show. But like, I've never hunted in my life, and it is one of my favorite shows. It is just so much fun to watch. Me and my wife watch it together. And she's like, why do we like this? She's like, we don't do any of these things. Like, yeah, we do eat meat though. So I don't know. And it's just the way that it is presented. I just really love how, Steven Ranella is like, sometimes you'll talk to a black belt and you'll be like, everything, like, for example, when I talked to Huron Gracie, I was like, everything that this dude says should be written down. It's like philosophical. It's just like, this makes so much sense, the way that he says, the words that he uses. But anyway, back to that thought. Steven Ranella was doing an episode. I think they were looking for mule deer. Okay, so that's like, what whitetail deer are. Mule deer are bigger. They're really these big, beautiful deer. And he has been just early. It's the early seasons. He had never gotten what he kept calling the mule deer buck of his dreams. And he's like, I've been looking for him. And he even had a chance. I even think he missed that buck. Took a bad shot and missed it. And he was like, he was discouraged. And at the end of the episode, he didn't get anything. He finished the hunt with nothing. And he made this statement. And he was talking about, yeah, I'm a little discouraged. And he said, but I also ask myself, if I were to get the buck of my dreams, what would I dream about? And to me, that is so true in jiu-jitsu. So often we get clouded by our goals. We get clouded by, I want to get to black belt. But the journey is the enjoyable part. Those friendships that you build in jiu-jitsu are the enjoyable part. Those processes, they're the enjoyable part. I look back, one of the black belts that I got to promote, and I'll introduce you guys to all these black belts eventually. It's kind of a thing that once you get your black belt under me, you got to be on the podcast, right? But one of the guys that I promoted, his name's Justin, and he and I started training like 6 months apart. And we were about the same age. I think he's like a year and a half older than me. We were about the same age. We would skip high school classes together and go train, and skip whole days of school, multiple days of school, and go compete. And it was this amazing journey that I realize now, looking back, like, I'll never get that again. There's never going to be a point where I have so few responsibilities in my life that the only thing that matters is me and my buddy leaving and going and competing, right? Me and my buddy leaving and training for 3 and 4 hours a day, and then going and getting lunch, so then we could make it back in time for our regular class that we would go to. And I was able to, the journey happened, and I was able to promote this guy to black belt. And now a new journey begins, right? He teaches at my school. And this is a new journey that there is. But we could easily get clouded again and say, because back then, the goal was to do this, was to have a jiu-jitsu school and teach jiu-jitsu together. And now we're here. We can never go back again. We can never be in high school again. I mean, I suppose if we both went to college and got teaching degrees, we could be in high school again. But besides that, we couldn't go. We probably, neither of us could pass any classes. There's no way we could be teachers. But the big thought there, the big focus there should be on the process, should be on that journey, because that journey was so much fun. And I'm happy that we're where we are now. But don't forget, you're only going to be here today. That's the only guarantee. This is the only part of the learning process that is guaranteed. You could get a significant injury and never get to train again. You could have something else happen in your life and never get to train again. So don't just get obsessed with your goal. Don't just get obsessed with where you're trying to be. Make sure that you're focusing on the process, that you are enjoying the process. And the last little tip that I will give you, and this is actually the same tip that I ended that Elbows Tight podcast that I told you guys about. Same exact tip that I gave when they said, if you could give, white belt any advice, what would it be? Get inspired. Stay curious. Stay curious is the name of this point, this last tip for the growth mindset. But inspiration, it's the same thing. Finding inspiration. If you are curious, you find inspiration in everything. I find so much inspiration having conversations with blue belts, and they just ask me certain questions in certain ways that I've never thought of. And I'm like, huh, I've never thought of it like that. Let me spend 5-10 minutes thinking about what you just asked me. Let me see what ideas come from this inspiration that you've given me. This is a conversation I just had with one of my purple belts. He was saying, I am struggling to learn. And so we start to talk, and we end up talking for about an hour. And the conversation was this, like, I don't really love instructionals. I don't really love watching live matches. Like, well, when do you get better? And, we talked, and he's like, I do sometimes get better in class, but it's not all the time. And then as we talked more and we talked more, we found out that he progresses most from what we were doing at that moment, having a jiu-jitsu conversation. Because as we talked, and he talked to a black belt about all these problems that he's facing, I gave some examples of things that I've done to help with those problems and some things that other students, other teammates have done that have helped with those problems, that discouragement, that, those troubles that he's facing, just all of the challenges that he's facing, the obstacles that he's facing. We found out that most of the time he would overcome those obstacles by asking a higher level guy a question and then having a conversation about it and getting all kinds of perspective. And it would give him inspiration, and he would then be better at jiu-jitsu from that. That is the process for that purple belt getting better. And so how he will continue to get better is by staying curious. Because if you're having good conversations with high-level guys, they should be fixing those problems for you after a couple conversations, right? You start implementing what they say, and you should be getting better. But here's the question. Here's the thought. What happens when you run out of questions? Well, you need to develop ways to stay curious. You need to, I notice that my highest level guys tend to pay the most attention when I teach. And they've seen me teach this crap. They've heard me teach these things. But what they are looking for is one new sentence, one new little perspective, one new little bit. And then what'll happen is they'll ask me questions about it. Perfect example, back to Justin, who I was just talking about. This is way back a whole week ago when he was still a brown belt. I went to one of his no-gi classes, and he was showing some pressure from side control. And he said, and you put your hand here. And it's a place that I've put my hand before, but it never got it to work. And so I'm trying, it's still not freaking working. Justin's walking around and he's helping people. And he goes, hey, I think your hand should be here. Literally, he moved my hand 3 inches. And all of a sudden, it was this monstrous change. It was this change that I went, if I had known this, if I had done this a week ago when I was competing, I might have even gotten a better result if I had this little detail. And then I ask him a few more questions, and he starts giving me these other examples and these other ideas. Just that one little detail, it made me more curious. It inspired me to ask new questions. And I got 1% better from, I might have gotten 2% better that day because it was such a significant detail. And had I have been the typical black belt and said, all right, this guy's teaching something from side control. I have a great side control. I don't need any tweaks. He gave me this huge tweak. He inspired me to ask questions. Next time I go to his class, I'm actually going to have more questions about that specific grip. That only comes from being curious. And so that's what I'll leave you guys with. Like I said, I have 3 minutes before me and my dad are supposed to go train. And so we will continue this conversation on mindset and really tie it together with some mental toughness and what that means and how to develop it, how to keep it, how to grow it. And we'll do that next week. And that's all I have for you guys today. Let's let Josh take it away for the outro. And that is the episode. Thank you guys for checking this one out. I really had fun recording this episode. Anytime you're trying to deconstruct mindset, it's like it's a lot of fun for me because it's hard to think about how you actually learn and how you actually grow, and being able to get in those conversations about, with myself, obviously hanging out in my studio, but getting to have those conversations to explore those thought processes and what is actually helpful, what isn't helpful. And, especially like looking back, it's much easier to look back than it is to say today what problems I have. But I can look back 10 years ago and say, oh, I had these big problems. I had these big things that I've gotten better at or I've grown from. And it's really fun to get to do that. Really enjoy doing that. And the only reason I get to do that is because you guys continue to listen to the show. And so thank you guys for listening to the show. As I've told you guys a few times, we will very, very soon be getting back to doing some interviews, but we're going to keep Thursdays how they've been. Just me talking to you guys, kind of a cross between like a jiu-jitsu learning podcast and like Bill Burr's Monday morning podcast, right? Just me talking to you guys, talking to the camera. And I think we'll start to release some Tuesday interviews very, very soon. And I'll give you guys a heads up when we're going to be doing that and who we're going to be recording with and interviewing. If you guys have any suggestions about someone to interview or a topic that you would like to hear me dive into, this mental toughness episode that's coming out next week was a recommendation from one of my students. And to me, the best episodes tend to be listener recommendations. And so if you have any recommendations, send me a message, an email, josh@simplifyingjujitsu.com. You can try to send me a message on Instagram, but like as the podcast has grown, I get more messages and I check them less on Instagram. So please, if you really want contact with me, josh@simplifyingjujitsu.com is the best way to do that. Don't forget, hit me with that 5-star review if you are getting something out of this podcast. And if you want to know more about what we're doing, if you want to know more about what we're trying to do, be sure to sign up for the 3 Lenses ebook, and it'll give you more information, more perspective, and it will put you on my emailing list, and you'll get to hear from me a little bit more. And so that is all I have for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Most of all, I hope today's episode helps you guys suck just a little bit less at jiu-jitsu. Have a great day, guys.